I am from tables, from food and chopsticks. I am from spacious, comforting. I am from the evergreens, the Japanese maples whose long gone limbs I remember as if they were my own. I am from faith and laughter, from Caleb, Amira, and promise. I'm from praying and eating and from playing games. I'm from you are Chinese and safety first, and yao 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 da wai po chow. I'm from making dumplings. I'm from Washington and China, noodles and rice. From my parents immigrating to the US, learning to speak English, letters from my grandfather in Taiwan, in a scrapbook and in my heart.
All right, hello, CWACM. Welcome to our series where we're interviewing folks who are doing work in the community that we want to highlight for our organization to get to know. And so today I have the opportunity to interview my amazing friend who we've known each other for a long time. And so it's great that I get to interview my friend, but also Ellen is doing great work that I would love you all to get to know. So, with that, we'll start. So, Ellen, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, just start out by telling me about yourself, your name, and pronouns, and a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, so my name is Ellen Eileen Hoffman, and Eileen is my Chinese name. And Hoffman, I am married to my partner who is white. Pronouns she, her. And we live here in Bothell, Washington with our 3 kids. I have a 15-year-old son with Down syndrome and autism, and a typical daughter who is 13 now, and my littlest is 6, who is adopted from China.
Awesome.
And you asked me to share about what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I started a nonprofit called Soul Reparations, and our vision and our hope is to raise funds so that women of color have access to free spiritual direction. And for us, that is a form of providing reparations for women of color. Yeah, and so we just launched this year, have raised enough money to support 68 women with free spiritual direction. And what's beautiful about that is not just that these women are getting access to spiritual direction, but also that as a form of reparations, we also get to support these women of color directors who are trying to make a living by providing this service to women of color, and being able to pay them a really honoring wage for the time that they're putting in. And so that's been a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. What I love about it, in some ways, just that it's twofold. That the people that you're hiring are that your search directors, you're thinking about their work, their salaries, and thinking about that in a really holistic way, and also providing a service for folks who don't often get spiritual care, spiritual direction, who are like overworked and tired, and in some ways dealing with systematic racism and oppression often and all the time, and so in their careers, and so providing this. So yeah, that's so fun. I love it. Just tell me a little bit about like how did you get started? What's the impetus behind it? What's your vision for the work? But really, just like how did you get started with this? Why did you start doing it? How?
Yeah. So I've been working in my own practice providing spiritual direction for the last handful of years. And I had focused on women of color. That was my passion, kind of my calling. And the more women of color that I saw, the more it became really apparent to me and really clear to me, one, that they weren't having any other spaces to, that they weren't having other spaces like this where they could explore their identity, process their trauma around racism, process ways that they're trying to step away and move away from patriarchy and white supremacy, from the organizations and churches that they were a part of, that the church didn't have a space for them to process these things. And so in spiritual direction, I've just found that it was this space where women were able to kind of reclaim a sense of their own belovedness, their own identity, um, and agency over their faith, agency over their spirituality. And there was just a lot of liberation in that for me and for them that I thought was really beautiful. And so the more women that I started to see, the more my interest list or my wait list was growing, and I couldn't take on many more people beyond what the capacity I had. And so I started to think about how really this should be a ministry of reparations, that really these women deserve to have this space for free because of the trauma and the racism and the oppression that they've endured. But I was also thinking about the fact that they need to see a woman of color director. And so I thought, women of color directors, they also need to get paid, and they can't always be offering a sliding scale or doing it for free, because even if that's what their heart would desire to do. And so out of that place, I realized I could essentially raise funds and raise money so that we could accomplish both that women of color directors could get paid an honoring wage for what they're doing, and we could provide this for free for women of color. So that's really where it came out. It came from my own kind of love and experience with women of color, and walking with them and seeing what a fruitful space it was for their liberation and for their belonging and their belovedness, and then desiring to just see that grow and expand, but knowing that I couldn't do that myself.
Yeah. I think it's such a gift. Both like you as a spiritual director, like one, you're good at what you do, so that's a gift, but two, that that you're a visionary and could see beyond to say, like, just because my calendar itself is full and my capacity is at its limit doesn't mean that there isn't more that can be done. And so I think the vision of seeing it go just beyond yourself and see it multiply and see it be a gift beyond your personal capacity is really dope.
Thank you.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah. And the part of the need that I saw was why my interest list was filling up was because there's just not that many women of color directors. It is spiritual direction is primarily a field of older white men and women, and so there are not that many of us to begin with. And because of white supremacy, because of the systems, spiritual direction is not something that's widely known or offered, and so there's just limited access for women of color. To access it. So there was just so many limiting factors that I just wanted. I wanted access for them, and I knew that there were women of color directors out there, but they were so hard to find. And so I'm finding that Soul Reparations is becoming this also a network for spiritual directors of color to kind of be in one space, and it's lonely for us as directors. So it's been a great space to connect with other directors who care for and are about caring for our people. So
such a great resource that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is really just about the current moment that we're in, and that part of the reason why our organization in some ways is doing this is that what we have seen is that the global pandemic has such a impact on the personhood, both creativity or the capacity to see beyond the crisis of the moment. And so I guess I'm wondering, how has you've been going for a year, right? So has the vision shifted at all in the midst of this pandemic? How's it impacted the work that you're doing? Just any thoughts or reflections as you kind of think about the current moment that we're in.
Yeah, I love this question because honestly, this vision
and this organization was really birthed out of the pandemic. So like you're saying, during the pandemic, the increased levels of racial violence and trauma that was publicized, the increased levels of stress for people everywhere. But there was also this other side of that where people had a little bit more space and time to think about their lives and reflect on their lives a little bit deeper. There's space for creativity. So a friend of mine during the pandemic started a podcast called Reclaiming My Theology. And again, that was because she's stuck at home. This was a project she'd been thinking about for a long time. Now is a great time to do it because there was time, lots of time to do something like this that was really accessible for people everywhere. And she invited me to be on this podcast. And so as a guest on this podcast, I got to share about spiritual formation and white supremacy. And it was a really fun conversation. But that then was where I think then my interest list grew beyond my capacity, because after listening to that, people were reaching out like crazy. And again, I think because of the pandemic, you know, people were getting amazing access to this podcast that was, again, birthed through the pandemic. It was meeting a need for where they were at in their spiritual questions and in their lives, allowing them to grapple with questions that no other space was allowing them to, and then space to ask for what they needed. And for some of them, that was spiritual direction. And so to reach out to me to look for that. And so because then I could, you know, I was physically seeing the need out there and the hunger and the and these women who are lining up because there was a real need. That's really where my brain started to kind of, you know, turn around. How can these women find spiritual direction outside of me? You know, how can we help this need? And it was just really, it was really beautiful to see, you know, something so incredible birthed out of a tragedy like the pandemic, and how, what a difficult, terrible time it's been. And yet really good, beautiful, creative things have come out of it. And all of our work is done virtually. So, you know, people are stuck at home, they're working from home, and it's way easier access, and they have the time to meet for spiritual direction or to pursue therapy or all the things that they, you know, need to tend to themselves.
Okay, well, my last question is more of a future question. And even as I'm looking at it and thinking about it, I do think there is a gift in like sitting in the moment of something that was just birthed, like a new baby, and it being like you just have a lot of time to watch and see how it moves, grows, what personality comes out. But I guess my question is, what vision do you have for where you'll go from here? Of course, I lost my question. And what's your hope for the impact in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to think about that question, because even in this first year, I mean, even in the last 6 months, it's already taken a shape that's different than what I thought it would be when I first started it.
I've watched your website switch so much in the like, whoa, so much is happening. So yeah. Continue.
Yeah, right. At first, the vision was really like, we've got one primary spiritual director. She could take on maybe 24 to 30 folks. You know, we were just keeping it small. Let's just even see if we can raise enough funds to support her as a spiritual director. And as more and more funds came in, and as more and more people just caught this vision I think that they enjoyed the practical ways that they could be a part of reparations. And that they didn't find any other places where this was happening. And so we raised a lot more money than I thought we could. And so because of that, and because, you know, our primary spiritual director could only take so many people, at the same time, people were connecting me with other spiritual directors of color that they knew. Hey, do you know so-and-so? And so as I connected with these women, I was like, we could contract, you know, a handful of these women so that it gives us a diversity of directors to walk with people, different people in different ethnicities and different stages of life. And there was enough funds to do that. So instead of having one, we now have 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And that's been really beautiful, again, because it's really subsidizing these women's, their go at making spiritual direction a way of life for them. So that's been really beautiful. So I think my hope at this point is really, I want to see it grow. I think I had such small expectations in the beginning for how much money we could raise. And honestly, it's been easy. I mean, it's been the easiest fundraising I've ever done because people have caught on to this vision pretty easily. So I'd love to grow the number of women that we're able to serve. 68 is great, but I'm pretty sure we could easily add 100 more to the interest list. So
Wow.
I would love to see more women be seen. I would love to add some more spiritual directors of color to our team, so that again, it just, to be able to hold the capacity of people that we'd love to see. And then I think, eventually my heart is really for, again, how can we give as many women access to this? And again, I really think, again, because of, I think, my leadership background, I'm like, how can we help develop and raise up more women of color directors who can hold this kind of space for other people? And not just directors, but even groups of friends. I believe this is something that communities should be doing for one another, and that friends can do for one another, that it doesn't have to be a trained spiritual director. I think this is how we should do life together and be for each other spiritually. And so can I train small groups of women to hold that space for one another and to walk with their friends in this way? So those are some of the things I'm dreaming about.
Yeah, I love that. Well, this is why I love it. Just say this, and I'll just throw it out into the atmosphere for the spirit to do whatever the spirit wants to do.
Yeah.
But what it sounds like in some ways, even just what I know about spiritual direction, right, is that like if spiritual direction, most of the people who are doing it are white. I'm assuming that also people who are training it are also white.
Absolutely.
And so that themselves the models, right? And so what I hear in some ways is a model for spiritual direction that isn't individually focused, isn't like just one person with one person, which is a really like white, patriarchal, capitalist, individualist way of doing things. But what about communities? And what about empowering people that don't have access to the money it takes to go to school and things like that, to be able to have the capacity to use gifts from the divine to be able to do that, So all of that feels like, ooh, so nice.
Yes. I love it. Yeah. And it's true. There are no training programs that are specifically catered to people of color. I would love to start that someday. But really, I just think that we are wired in such a way to walk with one another. I mean, yes, a lot of spiritual directors are white, but throughout history and throughout time, we had elders, we had people who were wisdom keepers in our communities who walked with us and did life with us, and they weren't trained. It's we had a way of being present to one another. And that happened in every culture and in every time period. And I just think we can learn that. We can learn how to do that. It's in us to be able to walk with one another that way.
Yeah. I love it.
Love it too.
So good. Well, tell us how we find you. So whether like people who are looking for spiritual direction, spiritual directors, and people who might want to give. Tell us
so you can head to our website, soulreparations.org, and our list for, if you're looking for a spiritual director, our list is closed for 2022, but it's open for an interest list for 2023. So fill that out. We'd love to have you join that interest list. And if you're interested in giving, there's a donate page there and you can give there.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.